Hooray, the feds pull funding on the California bullet train. J.D. Vance and his wife met by protesters in Nantucket. Politics and show business don't mix. This is Dr. David D. Schein for Saving America with my own take on key stories from this past week focused on politics and business. I'm like a kid in a proverbial candy store with so many choices of potential stories. Deadbeats in Congress. Most Americans know that members of Congress take a number of breaks during the year. In fact, they are out of session about as much as they are in. In my book, Bad Deal for America, I not only call for term limits, but I also turned DC into a museum basically and sent all these clowns home to continuously connect with their real constituents. I thought the summer break might relate back to the pre-air conditioning days. After all, DC is hot and humid in the summertime. I used to live there. I know that for a fact. However, the U.S. Capitol is one of the first buildings to get climate control, courtesy of that amazing American Willis Carrier who invented it in 1902. The U.S. Capitol was air conditioned in 1928, and reportedly it is cold, not hot. I note the Texas legislature, and take note of the sheer size of Texas, only meets for 5 or 6 months in odd-numbered years. So we could pay members of Congress a great deal less if we designated them part-time, required them to work from their home districts, and a novel idea, actually work for the people during the defined period when we suffering taxpayers are paying them. Apparently, the so-called August recess system started in 1961, not 1861. Well, Speaker Johnson reportedly does not want to take a vote on the Epstein files, so he simply began the August recess in July. I've generally been supportive of Johnson, but as a taxpayer, I want my money back now. Encryption and electronic communications have reached such a level that being in DC, where they can spend a lot of other people's money, like flying to a foreign country to support a criminal illegal, is simply a luxury the American people cannot afford and should not accommodate. Let's save some money. Washington, cut your salaries, cut your benefits, and go home. J.D. Vance and his wife met by protesters in Nantucket. Most of our Saving America audience know that I work from my home base in Houston, Texas. There's a phrase in Texas, I was not born here, but I got here as fast as I could. In fact, I grew up as a kid in southeastern Massachusetts, not far from Nantucket. I had a very unpleasant childhood experience there in a small town and happy to never visit there again. So recently, J.D. Vance and his wife, Usha, went to Nantucket for a routine fundraiser. Reminder, both political parties do them, and it's part of the reality of politics. Their motorcade was met with about 200 protesters. In fairness, there was a counter-protest by some patriotic Americans, and there was no violence. So I looked up the protest organizers. The lead operation is called Indivisible Nantucket, and another was Indivisible Upper Cape. Cross links to the Indivisible Massachusetts were found. The Upper Cape one had the more definitive website with positions opposing the current path of America. So they're mad at the country is moving away from woke in the fascist left direction of wayward states like Massachusetts. They view the Trump administration, in this case, J.D. Vance, as a representative of the administration, as a target. They spout off about democracy, but most of the organizers' viewpoints are in sync with less than 20% of the U.S. population. It seems to me if they were really about America and democracy, they would be for what the majority of Americans support. Not a single conservative I know supports racial discrimination, but that means no discrimination based on race, not DEI nonsense. If these groups bothered to learn about J.D. Vance's classic American success story, why would they select him to protest? Wouldn't our real Americans salute someone who went through the very tough times as a youth, but rose above it all to become a Yale law grad, successful businessman, and the VP of the United States? These whack fringe groups make it sound like being an American means that you are against immigration or immigrants. I'm a hardcore in favor of immigration. That is the legal immigration path, like my grandparents and millions of others followed to come to this incredible country. Some of the other planks are just plain silly. Many of their positions are right out of the commie playbook. That does not sound like America to me. So don't push anti-American trash and claim to be supporting American democracy. Hooray, feds pulling funding on the California bullet train. I'm a longtime opponent of Fed funding for local transit projects. If a city wants a subway, pay for it themselves. In Houston, in the 1990s, this car and bus dependent city built a costly and limited service streetcar system. They call it a light rail system, but hey, it's just a fancy 1890s streetcar. The rider volume is terrible and the streetcars killed people. It does horrible things to traffic in the city, which is really the priority here. So, given the miserable performance, Houston, geniuses that they are, made it bigger, causing even more traffic problems and wasting even more money. I have suggested monorails in the very high traffic areas of the city. And after all, this is Space City. And Seattle has a successful short monorail that you could use that as an example. But I guess the feds gave them more for this failed streetcar system. In my opinion, this would never have been built without dramatic, substantial federal funding. So that brings me to another failed public boondoggle, the so-called California bullet train that was never actually built. Supposedly, it was supposed to connect Los Angeles and San Francisco. The original funding was north of $9 billion in California bonds with an additional $3.5 billion from the feds. But so far, the Secretary of Transportation, Sean Duffy, has said the estimated cost, get this, went from $33 billion to $135 billion. After just 17 years, there is no track or train in sight. So Trump just pulled the funding. Hey, it's about time. California loser governor, no sense, claims not building it helps China. What on earth is that fool talking about? A strong U.S. economy that is not up to its butt in debt is the way forward over red China. And I know that for a fact, folks. Texas flood update. In the midst of this tragedy, a bit of strange good news as the death toll has reached 135. However, after estimating that another 100 people were still missing, which would mean that they are likely dead, that number was cut to just a few. I'm still calling for an intensive investigation to make sure this never happens again. Smart businesses abandon stupid states. One of the latest companies to move its headquarters out of Delaware is the department store chain Dillard's. They're relocating to business-friendly Texas. As I reported several times recently, the reason is the sharp turn to woke of the Delaware Chancery Court. This is another significant loss for Delaware. Dillard's has over 250 stores across more than half the states. Parallel to this, Trump Media and Technology Group is leaving Delaware for Florida. This is the technology platform behind Trump's Truth Social. Not fleeing Delaware, but interesting all the same, is the popular In-N-Out burger chain, which has announced it is moving its headquarters from California to Tennessee. The 77-year-old company is reportedly closing a number of stores in California due to that state's $20 minimum wage across the whole state and the wild tax and spend policies of the state. California is also well known for other anti-employer policies. Remember the phrase, last one out, turn out the lights. That applies to California and Delaware. In fact, if the dirty commie Mamdani is elected mayor of New York City, I expect there will be a record exodus of businesses and landlords from America's most populous city and also what is regarded as the business capital of the world. Mexico City caution flag. In the midst of the busy summer travel season, Trump has declared that some changes to a key airport hub in huge Mexico City are a violation of a treaty between the two countries. I was not aware of this, but Mexico City has opened a new airport, the Felipe Angeles Airport, about 30 miles outside the city, according to reports. Mexican domestic flights are getting priority to the original Benito Juarez Airport, which is closer into the city. This would obviously give the domestic carriers a big cost or convenience advantage. Specifically mentioned was a cooperation agreement between Delta Airlines and Aeromexico, which could be suspended due to this dispute. Given the importance of American tourists to Mexico, this could be another short-lived spat between the two neighboring countries. June retail sales are solid. Despite frequent reports that the Trump tariffs are going to run up costs and kill business, retail sales were actually up in June. The American consumer economy appears alive and well. Other indices continue to be up and down. Housing still continues expensive and a questionable component during this time when home sales usually boom. Trump continues to call out Fed Chair Powell for not lowering the key Fed rate. Hey, not sure when that's going to happen. I know that rate's going to get lowered at some point. Hurting Trump's case, the fact that inflation ticked up slightly recently. So we're going to say politics and show business don't mix. I want to thank Janice for writing to Saving America. She wrote, "My dad is 84 years old, listens to your Saving America show on Saturdays. He wants to know what the doctor feels about the battle between Rosie O'Donnell and President Trump. He loves President. I love Rosie. We'll be listening to your show for your thoughts. First, we love to hear from our audience. Glad your dad is listening. Second, I'm a longtime fan of the great stand-up comedians. I remember Bob Hope, my all-time favorite, Johnny Carson, the king of late night. Then there were controversial George Carlin, Joan Rivers, and Don Rickles. Many, many more. Somehow they managed to walk the line between politics and show business. Bob Hope was unquestionably a conservative. Carson walked the line carefully, popping both sides. Rickles didn't care who he speared. Somehow a switch went off, not sure when, but sometime in the late 1990s into the last 2 decades. Comedians on the left decided to make a point of only spearing one side. The famous mock beheading of Trump by alleged comedian Kathy Griffin is perhaps the most egregious example. Sorry, folks, this is just not humor in anybody's book. This was not just, of course, comedians doing this, but others. Hollywood famously took a far left turn with many award shows. It turned into political assaults that were inappropriate and certainly offensive to many in the home audience. In fact, audience numbers for award shows has been dropping parallel to the politicization of these shows. I stopped watching the Academy Awards in the mid-1990s, for instance. I boycott movies with some of these folks, most notably George Clooney. I liked Rosie O'Donnell due to her early stand-up routines and early movies like A League of Their Own and Sleepless in Seattle. I did not know she was gay until I researched this piece, but that is her choice and does not impact my opinion of her. She had a successful talk show from the late 90s into the early 2000s. I never watched it, but she became more visible politically, I guess, in the last decade. She, like Clooney and others, turned me off. The fact that she left the USA for Ireland is not a plus from my standpoint. However, again, that is completely her choice. That's cool. Apparently, the feud with Trump is almost 2 decades long. The reports I read relate to when Trump owned the Miss USA pageant. In 2006, when the winner was found to have a drug problem, he required her to attend drug treatment to keep her crown. This seemed like a reasonable approach, but apparently Rosie, who was on The View at the time, went after Trump for this, and of course, the famously combative Trump fought back. Frankly, I really don't care. My advice to Trump would be to run the country and stay as far as possible from feuds like this, including the recent one with his #1 supporter, Elon Musk. Hey, life is short. In 2012, Rosie had a heart attack and Trump publicly wished her well. That seemed like a peace offering, but the two have kept at it. Again, this is not my thing and I do not follow this. However, Trump made reference to fat women and following some press questions cross-referenced Rosie. In my opinion, this was hurtful and inappropriate. Rosie would have no reason to be respectful to him and the ball keeps rolling. More recently, Trump has threatened to pull her U.S. citizenship. Janice, if I had a vote on this topic, I would ask Trump to lay off anyone in Hollywood and elsewhere and focus on the good of the country. Such feuds help nobody. Speaking of Hollywood, Late Night with Stephen Colbert has been canceled, although interestingly, not until next May. In the Why Would I Care department, with the departure of Johnny Carson, Jay Leno, and even David Letterman, I stopped watching any of the late evening talk shows. The newer shows are just political trash pits with people I never heard of in most cases or did not like, including the host. Recently on Unscripted Politics, my co-host Kevin McDonald indicated he felt this was a political hit job. He referenced the Paramount settlement of $16 million with Trump as evidence. I disagree. A show that costs $120 million to produce annually and loses $40 million should have been canceled already. TV is a business. I assume it is not being pulled early or due to contractual commitments to Colbert. In my case, I watch the local news, and sometimes before I can change the channel, this windbag would inevitably start with something offensive to me. Hey, not a good start. Colbert might want to consider what he's doing. However, the whack left, led by Pocahontas herself, Liz Warren, claimed it was only due to politics. Of course, this is why America is in debt up to its butt due to moronic political leaders like her. The Total Dummy Award. By now, if you watch any news, you know that the married CEO of tech company Astronomer, Andy Byron, was at a Coldplay concert with the HR director of the company. Something called the Kiss Cam that has been around for a while in certain stadiums features a couple on a big screen who can turn away or vamp for the camera. For some reason, this couple did a big hug, seemingly led by the man, not the woman. Well, the video went viral and he was identified. He subsequently tendered his resignation to the company, and that has been accepted. A week later, there's a rumor he's going to try to sue the band or the stadium, something like that. Some legal pundits have not given that much of a shot, noting that being in plain view in a big concert venue pretty much is the end of privacy anyway. A word to the wise, if you're thinking of fooling around, don't. And if you ignore that advice, choose a quiet restaurant, hotel off the main beat, not a big rock concert with a kiss cam. This is Dr. David D. Schein. Thanks for joining me for this special edition of Saving America. Remember, a new Saving America show is aired on the Brushwood Media Network every Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Listen on any of the 16 network stations, Apple or Google mobile app, Apple CarPlay, TuneIn, Smart Speaker, and all smart TVs. Find more information at the brushwoodmedianetwork.com. Please be sure to join us each week. We welcome and love your feedback from our growing audience.